Iran's new sea mines and drone boats just shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That's the headline making the rounds, and it's spreading for one reason. It sounds like a switch got flipped, like the world's most important choke point went from open to closed overnight. But here's what you need to know right away. A strait doesn't get shut down like a door. It gets choked by fear, risk, and uncertainty until shipping companies decide the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And that's exactly why mines and drone boats are such a perfect weapon for this kind of disruption. They don't have to sink a fleet, they just have to make captains hesitate. So in this video, I'm going to do three things for you, fast and clean. I'm going to explain how mines and drone boats actually close a strait in the real world. I'm going to give you three signals to watch that tell you whether this is a temporary scare or a sustained shutdown. And I'm going to give you three realistic paths from here, because people keep treating this like it's either nothing or the end of the global economy, and that's not how this works. And here's the mini payoff right now so you don't have to wait for the point. The easiest way to disrupt global trade isn't to win a naval battle. It's to make insurance, navigation, and confidence collapse at the same time. That's the game. Now, before we go further, let's do the one thing the internet refuses to do: separate what's confirmed, what's claimed, and what's being sold. Because when people say Hormuz is shut down, they could mean three different realities. One, the strait is physically blocked by mines or damaged ships. Two, the strait is technically passable, but shipping operators won't risk it. Three, traffic is reduced and delayed, and someone upgraded that into closed for dramatic effect. Those are not the same, and if you want to understand what's happening, you need to know which one you're actually looking at. Now here's the key concept that makes all of this make sense. The Strait of Hormuz is not just water, it's a system. It's shipping lanes, traffic separation schemes, port logistics, escort procedures, insurance underwriting, satellite navigation, crew willingness, and the simple reality that no company wants to be the one that gets hit on camera. So when Iran uses sea mines and drone boats, they're not only attacking ships, they're attacking the system's willingness to function. Let's start with sea mines, because this is the oldest trick in modern maritime conflict, and it still works. A mine is cheap compared to a warship. A mine doesn't have to chase you. A mine just has to exist somewhere you might pass. And the psychological effect is brutal because mines create a unique kind of fear. With missiles, you can sometimes see the threat coming. With drones, you can sometimes spot them. With mines, you can do everything right and still lose your ship. That uncertainty is the whole weapon. Now, here's what most people misunderstand. Mines don't need to cover the entire strait. They don't need to blanket the whole area. If you can create credible suspicion in a few key lanes, if you can convince shipping companies that the water might be seeded, you can slow traffic dramatically. Because the response to mines is not keep going. The response is slow down, reroute, sweep, investigate, escort, wait. And every one of those steps costs time and money. Now add the second tool, drone boats. Exploding uncrewed surface vessels, basically small, fast, hard to detect craft that can ram a ship or detonate near it. These are scary for two reasons. One, they can be launched and controlled in ways that are hard to attribute instantly. Two, they exploit the reality that most merchant ships are not built to fight. They're built to carry cargo efficiently. So if you're a ship operator and you're hearing credible reports of drone boats in the area, you don't think, we'll handle it. You think, why would we volunteer to be the example? And that's the point. Mines create invisible danger. Drone boats create visible, viral danger. Invisible risk plus visible risk equals a shipping corridor that becomes politically and financially radioactive. Now here's the part that ties it all together, and this is where the cash flow of global trade starts bleeding. Even if the US Navy and partners can defend the strait militarily, shipping is a business decision. It runs through insurance. If insurers label the route too risky, premiums spike. If premiums spike, costs spike. If costs spike, some voyages stop making sense. And even when a voyage still makes sense on paper, captains and crews have something called the right of refusal in high risk zones, depending on contracts and local laws. So it's not just can you sail, it's will you sail. And will you sail is what closes the strait in practice. Now let's make this concrete because otherwise it sounds abstract. Imagine you're running a tanker company. You hear that the strait might have mines. You hear that multiple ships were struck by drones or projectiles nearby. You hear that navigation signals are unreliable. You hear that escort plans are uncertain. You also know that if you send a ship through and it gets hit, it becomes global news instantly. Your company becomes a headline. Your insurer gets angry. Your crew is traumatized, and your shareholders ask why you took the risk. So you do what businesses do under uncertainty. You pause, you wait, you demand higher prices to justify risk, you reroute if you can. You look for alternatives. That pause is what people mean when they say, shut down. Now, I promised 3 signals you can watch to tell whether this is a temporary disruption or a sustained closure. Here they are. Signal 1, the mine clearing tempo. Mines are not removed by vibes, they're removed by slow, methodical work. If you start seeing credible indications that mine sweeping is ramping up, specialized vessels operating, defined corridors being declared safe, escorted convoys forming, that's a sign the system is trying to reopen lanes. If instead you see repeated warnings, repeated incidents, and no stable safe corridor, then the risk is staying high. Signal 2, insurance and shipping behavior. This is the most honest signal because it's expensive to fake. If insurers keep premiums elevated and operators continue to avoid the route, the strait stays closed in practical terms, even if the water is physically open. If premiums fall and traffic returns gradually, you're seeing normalization. Signal 3, attack pattern and attribution. If drone boat attacks or suspicious incidents continue, especially if they appear coordinated or repeatable, operators will remain spooked. If incidents drop off and the threat becomes more theoretical than real, confidence can rebuild. Now, before we talk about what happens next, let's address the biggest misunderstanding in the whole conversation. People treat this like Iran is trying to own the strait militarily. That's not necessary. You don't have to dominate the strait to disrupt it. You just have to create enough uncertainty that commerce refuses to volunteer. That's asymmetric warfare at sea, and it's powerful because the cost to the attacker is low compared to the economic cost imposed on everyone else. Now you might be thinking, okay, but won't the US just clear the mines and escort ships? That's part of the response, yes. But it's not as simple as it sounds, because mine warfare is slow, and even a single mine can force lane closures and long investigations, and drone boats complicate escorts because they add a different kind of threat, small, fast, ambiguous, and hard to pick up early. So the response becomes layered, and layered responses take time to stabilize. Now let's get into the 3 realistic paths from here, because this is where people either panic too hard or dismiss too fast. Path 1, short disruption, fast partial reopening. In this path, the threat is real, but it's contained. A few incidents create fear, then coordinated naval presence, mine sweeping, and defined corridors allow cautious traffic to resume. Not full confidence, but enough movement that the shutdown becomes a slowdown. In this scenario, you'll see convoys, safer lanes, and gradual normalization. Path 2, stop and go disruption. This is the most likely messy reality. Traffic tries to resume, then another incident happens. Confidence rises, then drops. Insurers adjust, then spike again. The strait becomes a zone of intermittent paralysis, where every new report triggers fresh hesitation. This is how uncertainty can persist for weeks, even without a constant barrage. Path 3, sustained denial by risk. In this path, Iran or aligned actors keep the threat alive with periodic mines, periodic drone boat attempts, periodic incidents, and persistent navigation disruption, not necessarily enough to physically block the strait, but enough to keep it economically closed because the risk never stabilizes. This is the scenario that makes governments and markets sweat because it turns into a durability contest. How long can the system keep paying the cost? Now, here's the mistake people make when they hear Hormuz shut down, and I'm going to say it clean. They think the first day tells you the whole story. It doesn't. Day one is shock. Day two tells you whether the shock is contagious. If the second day brings another incident, another credible warning, another shipping pause, then the shutdown narrative gains strength. If the second day brings stabilization efforts that actually work, clear corridors, safer movement, calmer insurance, then the story shifts from closed to managed. Now, there's another layer that matters here, and it's subtle but huge: navigation. When GNSS and AIS become unreliable or spoofed, even routine movement becomes risky. Ships rely on positioning and monitoring systems not only for navigation, but for collision avoidance, traffic management, and compliance. If the environment becomes a dark zone where signals are confused, that increases accident risk and makes everything harder, including mine avoidance, drone detection, and escort coordination. So when you hear mines and drone boats, don't ignore the third tool: uncertainty in the information layer. Because you can harden ships and sweep mines, but if the picture stays foggy, confidence stays low. Now let's bring this down to what people actually care about: consequences. A Hormuz disruption doesn't just affect oil in abstract. It affects shipping schedules, energy prices, insurance costs, and the broader confidence that trade can move normally. It also forces rerouting where possible, which creates bottlenecks elsewhere. And it raises political pressure fast, because nobody wants to be blamed for a global price spike. That pressure can lead to escalatory decisions, or it can lead to negotiations and de-escalation efforts. But either way, the strait becomes a lever. Now, I want to land this with one clean takeaway that's worth clipping and remembering. A strait doesn't close when the water is blocked. It closes when risk becomes unpriceable. That's when trade freezes. And mines plus drone boats are designed to push risk into that zone, cheaply, repeatedly, and with maximum psychological impact. So if you want to track whether this is ending or deepening, don't chase the loudest headline. Watch the boring signals: mine clearing progress, insurance behavior, and whether incidents stop or repeat. Now I want your take. Do you think this is primarily a short-term shock tactic, meant to spike pressure and then fade? Or do you think it's the start of a longer denial by risk strategy designed to keep the strait economically closed without needing a full naval battle? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, where we strip the drama out and explain the mechanics, subscribe.